It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today, we're gonna have a reaction discussion video about the Kerasu from MintSkull titled The Kerasu Situation is Crazy. And I wanted to give my thoughts on it because I personally have not played the Kerasu at all. I just didn't find the chapter to be really that interesting to me. And that's just a personal preference thing. It doesn't have to be everybody's cup of tea. So I just chose really not to play it. I was just more so focusing on grinding, playing Ghostface. So when I do go live, make sure you tune in if you want to see me play Ghostface and grind to the top of the leaderboards. But with that being said,
this year, survivors are already complaining about this killer, even disconnecting in some cases and saying that she is better than Prime Ghoul.
You cannot be for real. I mean, to be fair, right? Every time any killer ever releases, they're complaining, because they're going against the same killers all the time. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because all the new killers get nerfed, right? So that people don't play them, then they go back to Blight and Nurse and Spirit and other S tiers. And then they complain that they get those characters, but it's like you complain that you already got the other characters that created some variety and you refused to counterplay. And now you're complaining again that you're still facing the same killers when you already just removed all the people's options because they don't want to play characters that are like C and D tier. They just don't. So at that point, you can't really complain because you kind of asked for you going into the same repetitive killer every match. Now, I think it's also goes without saying that of course you're going to see the same killer every damn game because it's a new character and everyone wants to try them out and see if they like the character. That happens every time there's a release, happens every time there's even a survivor out. You will see the same for all of them. All the four of them are going to be the same exact characters, like using the new perks. So it goes both ways.
That is not even mentioning all of the buffs that happened, like Myers now being much stronger, Nemesis being actually really good, Singularity now being almost S tier. Now you might think that obviously the developers would rather release a killer that is strong just so people buy them, play them, feel the power fantasy, and then nerf them once they get enough money. If you think like this, then you might be confusing League of Legends with DBD, because this is not something that happens in the game, and claim
I disagree with MintSkull on that point. Like literally we've seen this happen numerous times with DBD, at least from my perspective. We've seen a lot of killers kind of really drop down. I mean, Chucky is one that I remember vividly that was very good from the start. Very good killer. Felt very good to play. And then progressively got nerfed and then nerfed and then nerfed and to the point that now he's just a C tier killer. Despite what people may say, they love saying that he's an A tier. He's really not. Like, he doesn't have map traversal. He does not have a teleport. He does not have mobility. He has a dash, and if you can't get it down with it because of its easy counterplay, you know, just good luck trying to kill anyone at that point. That's a perfect example of that. Houndmaster, I'd find that hard to believe that Houndmaster wasn't. I mean, I don't even think Houndmaster was that popular, so that's not really a good example. We also technically saw that with the Ghoul as well. Like, we seen that they were very good from the start. A lot of people bought them, then they progressively nerfed them, and then nerfed them, and then nerfed them again. That happened. So, like, they do have a pattern of doing this. Like, a lot of characters are good at the start, and then they just get, like, destroyed, like, within like a week of them being out when they get enough sales. We've seen this happen before.
claiming it does is disingenuous. The last time, and the only solid example of this case, is Chucky, who went from a top tier killer to being trash for a while, only to get buffed back to being decent. That's it. All the killers mentioned before got buffed from release. Vecna got a massive buff after some time, Dracula got big buffs from the PTB, and now got a small nerf that did not make him any less of an S tier because Wolf form is still strong. Singularity got massively buffed, Ghoul literally got buffed on life and is still strong, and even Unknown only got buffs if you don't count the gutting of Vanishing Box. Outside of Chucky, there is genuinely no case of the developers releasing an overbuffed killer only to nerf it later.
So with that point being said, I do kind of understand where MintSkull is coming from, but I think that when people bring up this point where they say that they just get the sales and then nerf them immediately after is sort of an example being like Chucky or like Ghoul or like other killers that were mentioned in this conversation, was specifically the fact that like they start out really good, they start out strong, they start out like fun, and then progressively they get just update after update is always one extra little block of text saying, oh, and then we nerfed them again, oh, and then we nerfed them again. And then you know, despite the fact that they still remain strong, you could say on some cases like Vecna, like Dracula and stuff like that, they do end up nerfing them pretty much immediately, and they do have a history of doing that. So I guess it just depends on how the argument is framed. So I do agree and also disagree simultaneously on that point.
Once they get your cash, and Skull Merchant is not a good example either because she was fundamentally broken on release in terms of design, not in terms of power. These strong killers stay strong in the meta for a long while, and why this might be a problem you might ask? Because of power creep. The more new releases are strong, the more they overshadow past killers and C tiers unless they get a rework that gives them a strong dash like new Myers, who is finally no longer a weak killer. And what happens when killers are strong? Survivors complain, and then they get buffed with base kit perks like they tried to do in the PTB, or maps get adapted so they contain more fillers to allow casual survivors a chance to survive. And what happens when that is the case? That survivors need to be stronger to compete, and while strong killers can fight back, the old ones are left even more behind. Killers
I do agree with that point that it kind of keeps going back and forth because the survivor complaining is such a strong force against behavior to the point that any killer is just going to get gutted no matter what at this point. We've seen it happen. And it's unfortunate, you know what I mean? And then, you know, some of us that are saying like, well, it would be nice to have a little bit of quality of life changes to certain characters or full reworks for characters that do definitely need the help. And that usually never happens, unfortunately. And then they pitch like these ridiculously like mind-blowingly broken changes for Survivor base kit as we've seen in the recent PTB, with no compensation or anything for the lower tier characters, nothing for those characters at all, no consideration to strategy, no consideration to killer base kit to actually be able to compete at the same level. And it just doesn't make any sense, you know, and I don't really understand like why behavior is like so all over the place with these changes. Like I really feel like they need to just kind of maybe like slowly try to like test out each mechanic one at a time instead of dumping it all in at once, because you're not giving people enough time to test certain things. And it's just not great, as we've seen before. And obviously even furthermore, I think that they're not even taking the time out to necessarily give a lot of the low tiers any love, because they really just don't. From what we've seen in these like latest patches, like there's usually like maybe 5 characters that keep getting changed, and then there's some characters like Pinhead that haven't been changed since like 2021. So like kind of insane. I don't know why. Like they love to, like they had stated that they would, that each killer will have their time, but like that isn't really true. It's been years and we haven't seen changes for characters like Pinhead or characters like even like I like to say Ghostface needs a little bit of quality of life changes just to make him a little bit more like feel a little bit better to play. But that's just because I'm a Ghostface main, so that's like obviously just an anecdotal biased response. But you know, I'm not saying he needs like a massive like insane buff, but like it would just be nice to have little quality of life changes when it comes to some of the more bugged parts that he has, and you know, maybe a little bit to like try to help him keep up with the power creep going on with a lot of the characters, and especially with the Myers rework now, making him not garbage. You know, I think I would have considered Myers like C tier up to this point. I think he's probably going to be at least in B tier, if not higher, but I'm going to be just safe and call him a B tier for now.
like Sadako, Legion, Pig, Trapper. These killers got buffs, which were nice, but they simply cannot compete with the way the game is designed currently. Maps are filled with pilots that can be completely bypassed by Dracula and Krasue, but a massive problem for killers that are down on M1s like Trapper, Ghostface, or Dredge.
I 100% agree with MintSkull on that point as well. Like they're like, and that's the biggest problems, like one of the biggest problems with this game. And there's like a laundry list of issues with this game. Number one, obviously, survivor skill issue. And this is in no particular order. We're just going off the list. So it's like survivor skill issue, which ends up leading to really dumb changes. There's also the factor of high tiers versus the low tiers, where they like there's such a gigantic Grand Canyon gap between the two. So it's like you're trying to balance for the one thing, but then it's also negatively affecting the other thing. And then if you try to buff the other thing, then it will try to it might over buff the other thing. So like it's like it's a nightmare to balance that. And then obviously on top of that, you get complaints from Survivor, which ends up leading to ridiculous base kit changes, pitches, and stuff like that. Also, another issue would be the whole casual versus competitive like sides of the game and how they differ and how they view the game. And then that will also shift to complaints about killers using strategy. And then Swift comes along, and then that ruins the balancing of the game too. So, you know, that's just like a couple of like things in the game that already cause a lot of issues when it comes to actually trying to balance this game, which is very difficult to do. And like I've pitched before, I've always stated, like, if we were to able to just kind of raise up the lower tiers to be at the level of B tier and up, maybe it could create more variety. Maybe it could just make it more interesting for you know, for I would say both sides, because if other characters were more viable, maybe they wouldn't be as incentivized to only pick the strongest choices, and maybe pick something a little bit like Vecna or a little bit like Wraith or something instead, so that you still feel like you have a chance to win. Because it's more for feeling like you can win than it is to actually than it is to actually win, if that makes sense. Like, quality of life is mainly the focus that I'm trying to get at.
A survivor that can loop Ghoul is a survivor that can absolutely demolish any killer that plays as an M1 and has no mobility, like Trapper. Obviously, this is a problem. It's not something exclusive for Dead by Daylight, as the term power creep existed before the game was even conceptualized. But it is a serious problem that is happening now more than before. The gap between S tiers and D tiers is increasing with every single patch. How do you prove to a survivor player that the game is survivor sided when they are constantly facing ghouls and Krasues while you are playing Sadakos and Pigs? Obviously,
that right there is where the biggest disconnect with DBD is the fact that we've seen these points being made before. Like the mentality that they tend to have is, because Blight and Nurse exist, therefore it's killer-sided. And it's like, no, that's not entirely the case. Because not every single killer can land a streak that's even close to what Blight and Nurse can do. But also, even Nurse and Blight players are not good enough, like on average, are not good at the character enough to be able to land a streak like that on average. Because the people who did create these streaks are people with thousands upon thousands of hours that have so much knowledge of the game, have so much knowledge of the characters, that of course, if you're running the strongest thing you can with the strongest killer you have, with the most experienced character, like person using those things, of course you're going to have a pretty good chance. It just makes the most sense. But that's not applicable to the entire roster. And you can't just shovel it all off to, oh, it's killer-sided because of the existence of those things. Now, we obviously understand that if it truly was, like if we're going to go off of the statistics, the data given to us from behavior, which behavior is usually pretty tight-lipped when it comes down to dropping this information, but when we do end up getting information, we actually did get a graph, or not a graph, but a little image saying the win rates and, you know, kill rates and stuff like that. Kill rates, I think on average have been 60%. people, you know, I know a lot of the people like to bolster it up for some reason and try to say it's 7. I've seen people say it was 70%. I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. Like, that was never stated. The data states 60. That's what they've said. That's what they've said. So that's about a 3, they say. About a 3K is the goal that Behavior has stated that they want the killers to get. So they're saying kill rates about 60, and then when we saw the escape rates for solo queue and Swift, Swifts were getting about, I believe it was 50%. It was 48%. And then when it was like trios, duos, and then solos, it was like, it kind of went down to like 40 or something like that. So the escape rates were literally the same, pretty much around the same across the board, Swift being the highest, and then I think solo queue being like 40 or 41 or something like that. And if it truly was like killer sided, I would imagine that the escape rates would be quite low. Like, it would not be 40, it would probably be like 30 to 20 or even 10. You'd be like, what the hell? Like, then I would understand, oh, okay, I get it now. Like, we're seeing it in the data, like the kill rates are like 90%, the win rates are like insane for everybody playing the game and not just like, you know, extremely skilled players. So I think like it's a bit disingenuous to kind of state that. And I know, like, I've seen it so many times, like they try to bolster it and say these ridiculous points without much evidence when the data speaks for itself. Like they state that the game is where they want it to be at in terms of where the balancing is at. If the escape rates were to increase like a good amount, maybe it would increase to 50, 60, 70%, they might start to see that it is truly starting to head into a direction that they're not really favoring. Now, obviously, we do understand though that even despite all of the data, we understand that Behavior themselves have been extremely survivor favored for a very long time. We've seen that in recent patches. It has been a lot of quality of life, a lot of buffs to perks that really did not need any, with very little to no changes really coming to killer that I would say really changed much about the killers. In my opinion, like maybe Clown got a little better, but I wouldn't say that any of the lower tiers really got changed, and I don't even think the high tiers really are affected. It's been basically the same. The high tiers are still have still been the high tiers. Like there really hasn't been much of a difference. And of course, people just want to play stronger killers because they want to have fun with the game and not have to worry about 2 gens flying, because they just ended up in like 2 chases.
Now use the catch-up abilities of Headlong Flight, and survivors have no answer, as before they could just pre-drop the pallet to force you out of the flight. Next up, she got a significant buff to all of her cooldowns. You can attack as the head faster than before, you can transform back to her body faster, the flight recharges faster, basically everything she could do in the PTB is now faster life, except vaulting pallets, funnily enough. And the biggest and most noticeable change is the fact that her dash attack no longer has collision in the beginning, so all that getting stuck in the environment trash that happened in the PTB is no longer there. But this is a gigantic buff to her lethality, as now she's stronger on basically all loops. It's like if Demogorgon and Wesker could slide and hook take every single wall, which is insane. And if that was not enough of a...
I will say though that when I did see her in the PTB, she did not really seem that strong in my opinion. Obviously the buffs do make her a lot better. But I do think that we are forgetting that despite the fact that these abilities are in the game, I mean, despite the fact that we're also getting an original killer that has a scamper ability that was removed from Chucky, which already does frustrate me as a Chucky player, but because I don't understand how this got to release, but Chucky had a scamper and that got immediately removed. I don't get it. How come Chucky can't have his scamper is my bigger question, but besides the point, she does look pretty strong, right? She does look stronger now with the buffs. So from the PTB, I would say she did need buffs. Were the buffs a bit strong? Possibly. I mean, we'll continue.
They also increase her turn rate, so dodging this attack as a survivor is much harder than in the PTB if Krasue starts the attack close to you, which is easy since she moves at 120% speed at all times in head form. Currently, Krasue is objectively overtuned. She was already decent in the PTB, and all these buffs made her significantly stronger than she needed to be. Just adding one of the buffs from life would be enough instead of adding all of them at once, which is crazy because once again, I want to remind you that the devs considered her to be an S tier already in the PTB, so I genuinely see no reason to overbuff her so much. And you might argue that it is still too early to tell, and survivors have not adapted yet, like this Alan Wake, who healed himself before taking the infection out, making him lose time. Or these survivors that understand that her biggest weakness is body blocking, which requires good game knowledge and coordination. Or how some claim that her counterplay are mushrooms, when Krasue can still injure you under the effects of them, and they also got nerfed as there are less spawns on the map overall. But I think it's safe to say that
I gotta say though, you know, I do agree with MintSkull to an extent, and the extent is that it's in the key term of coordination and, you know, communication, right? We understand that the vast majority of survivors are objectively not necessarily good at the game. Like, we've already understand that. And that's why we understand that something like Kerasu that requires game knowledge and requires counterplay in the same way that even Ghoul did in the past and still does. And that's why they hate Ghoul, is the fact that you can't play mindless against this character. Like, this is another character that shakes up the meta, shakes it up so that you have to think about spacing, timing, pathing, like, you know, body blocking your teammates that have infections. Like, these are things that actually require people to engage with the game instead of shift W pre-drop everywhere they go. And I think that is probably why a lot of people are having an issue with it, and why a lot of people have hated Ghoul in the past, because it requires them to actually think. And instead of being able to, like, sort of autopilot and then just kind of windows of opportunity, press spacebar, hold forward, and continue to do that. And that's might be one of the bigger points. Now, on the other hand, I will say though that the character is objectively pretty good. She has really good speed. She's got a scamper, which I'm still salty that it's not on Chucky. The other fact that they did reduce a little bit of the mushroom spawns, which could affect a little bit of the countering. They adjusted the mushrooms so that, like, you gain some kind of immunity. It might help the, like, counter the Kerasu a little bit, but I'm not sure. But at least with head form, I'm assuming, because, like, I just saw, like, the Kerasu swing at this chick who's not infected. She doesn't take any damage. So if you're body blocking somebody who has an infection and you don't want them to go down, I'm pretty sure you just, if you don't have the infection on, you just body block. So, like, yeah, I can say she's strong. Like, I would say she's, like, I don't want to say, like, S tier, but, like, I'm like, hey, she looks pretty strong. Maybe A, you know? But I think the character looks, at least from my perspective, the character just looks stronger because people just do not know how to play the game. I think that might be a big issue on their end. However, the character is also new, so maybe that's also why, but I do think that is a big factor.
buffing a killer with 10 buffs who was already considered A tier in the PTB is not a good idea regardless, and I hope everyone can agree. So the power creep problem is something that is incredibly hard to fix, and a topic for another day, another video.
Those are my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think in the comment section. If you played Kerasu, what do you think? Is she an S tier or is it overblown? Let me know your guys' thoughts on, I guess, my thoughts as well, because, like, I think it might be a little bit overblown. I feel like we need a little more time to kind of see where the character lands, in a sense, just to fully make sure that this character really is as crazy as they say. But I do also understand that, you know, the vast majority of the Survivor players are extremely casual, really have, like, thousands of hours and still play like they just fresh installed in some cases. And I understand that. Like, I can acknowledge that does happen in some cases. So I do understand that going against characters that kind of counter what is pretty much has been the meta for like as long as it has been is going to be a bit of an annoyance for those people that they have to relearn things. But that being said, thank you guys for watching. Check out the links in the description to support the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Consider following on TikTok and Twitch to watch me play Kiddo live. I will see you guys in the next one.